February 25, 1964, Miami Beach Convention Hall. The betting line told the story. Sonny Liston 7-1 favorite. 46 out of 46 boxing writers predicted Liston would destroy the 22-year-old challenger named Cassius Clay. This wasn't analysis, it was consensus. The kid was talented, sure, but talent meant nothing against a monster like Liston. Liston had annihilated Floyd Patterson twice, both fights lasting less than one round. He'd demolished every contender with terrifying efficiency. His criminal past, his mob connections, his cold, dead eyes. Everything about Sonny Liston radiated danger. Even President Kennedy had privately expressed concern about having such a man as heavyweight champion. Clay, meanwhile, was dismissed as a loudmouth with a glass jaw. Yes, he'd won an Olympic gold medal. Yes, he was undefeated at 19-0, but he'd never faced anyone remotely like Liston. The Louisville Lip had talked his way into a title shot through sheer audacity and promotional genius, but talk wouldn't save him when Liston's fists started landing. That's what everyone believed. What nobody understood, not the experts, not the bookmakers, not even Liston himself, was that the fight had already been won. Not in the ring, but in the psychological warfare that had raged for months. The weigh-in that morning had been absolute chaos. Clay screaming, convulsing, appearing to have a mental breakdown. His blood pressure had spiked to dangerous levels. But that chaos was calculation. The screaming was strategy. And when the opening bell rang that night, something unprecedented was about to unfold. A combination of youth versus age, speed versus power, and calculated brilliance versus brute intimidation. A legend was about to be born, and the world wasn't ready. Louisville, Kentucky shaped him. Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. grew up in a segregated city where black children learned early about invisible boundaries and unspoken rules. But young Clay possessed something unusual, absolute refusal to accept limitations imposed by others. At 12, his bicycle was stolen. The theft led him to a police officer named Joe Martin, who trained boxers. "I'm gonna whoop whoever took my bike," the skinny kid announced. Martin's response? "Better learn to fight first." That moment redirected destiny. Clay discovered more than boxing in that gym. He discovered theater. While other fighters remained humble and quiet, Clay talked constantly. He predicted victories. He created rhymes. He treated boxing like performance art, understanding instinctively that sports was entering a television age where personality mattered as much as skill. By 18, he stood on an Olympic podium in Rome, gold medal around his neck, charming Italian reporters and kissing babies. America loved him. The handsome, articulate young champion who embodied the American dream. Then he returned to Louisville and walked into a whites-only restaurant, Olympic medal still hanging from his neck. They refused to serve him. That moment crystallized everything wrong with America's promises. The contradiction between what America claimed to be and what it actually was. The medal meant nothing compared to the color of his skin. By 1964, Clay had compiled a perfect professional record, 19-0 with 15 knockouts. His speed was unprecedented for a heavyweight. His footwork defied convention. He moved like a welterweight in a heavyweight's body. But speed and movement wouldn't matter, the experts said, when Liston's sledgehammer fists found their target. Tonight would prove who was right. The experts who dismissed him, or the kid who believed his own prophecies. Charles Sonny Liston embodied everything white America feared about black masculinity in 1964. Born into Arkansas poverty, imprisoned for armed robbery, connected to organized crime, Liston carried violence in his DNA. His mere presence intimidated opponents before they threw a single punch. His physical attributes were nightmarish. 84-inch reach, hands so large they required specially made gloves, and punching power that had never been scientifically measured because he destroyed the testing equipment. When Liston hit the heavy bag, it sounded like explosions. When he hit human beings, they didn't get up. Floyd Patterson, a decent, respectable former champion, had faced Liston twice. Both fights ended in round 1 with Patterson so psychologically destroyed that he wore a disguise to flee the arena afterward. "I've never been hit that hard," Patterson admitted. "It wasn't just physical pain, it was like my soul got hurt." Liston's pre-fight ritual maximized fear. He'd stare at opponents during the referee's instructions, a cold, dead-eyed gaze that seemed to look through people rather than at them. Most fighters couldn't maintain eye contact. They'd look away, and in that moment, Liston knew he'd already won. At 32 years old, Liston was in his prime. The mob controlled pieces of him, but that made him more dangerous, not less. He fought angry, carrying decades of poverty, racism, and violence into the ring with him. That anger fueled devastating knockout power. Against Cassius Clay, the oddsmakers saw no path to victory for the challenger. Liston was bigger, stronger, more experienced, and infinitely more vicious. The kid could dance and talk, but when Liston cornered him, and he would corner him, the dancing would stop and the destruction would begin. That was the certainty, until the opening bell shattered it. The bell rang at 10 p.m. Sonny Liston stalked forward with his trademark intimidating walk, the advance that had paralyzed Floyd Patterson. But Cassius Clay didn't freeze. He moved, circled, danced laterally at speeds Liston had never encountered. Round 1 was reconnaissance. Clay stayed at maximum range, flicking his jab, testing Liston's reflexes and reach. Liston pursued methodically, throwing occasional power shots that found only air. The crowd, expecting immediate violence, grew confused. Where was the destruction? Why wasn't the kid showing fear? Round 2 revealed Clay's strategy, speed, and distance. He'd studied Liston's pattern. The champion was devastating at close range but struggled with opponents who maintained distance and moved constantly. Clay's footwork was revolutionary. He moved in directions heavyweights weren't supposed to move, creating angles Liston couldn't anticipate. When Liston threw his jab, Clay was already gone. When Liston launched his right cross, Clay had circled outside its path. For the first time in his championship reign, Liston was chasing shadows. Round 3 brought the first significant exchange. Clay landed a combination, jab, jab, right hand, that snapped Liston's head back. A cut opened under Liston's left eye. The champion who demolished everyone was bleeding in round 3. More importantly, Liston's aura of invincibility was cracking. Clay's corner saw the shift happening. Angelo Dundee knew from studying film that Liston's conditioning was suspect. The champion relied on early knockouts because he'd never needed to fight deep into a bout. If Clay could survive the early rounds, if he could make Liston work, fatigue would become an ally. Round 4 arrived and Liston came out aggressive, sensing his mystique was fading. But Clay's speed hadn't diminished. The kid was still dancing, still talking, still making Liston miss. Round 4 ended. Clay returned to his corner, complaining of burning in his eyes. "I can't see," he shouted at Angelo Dundee. "Cut him off! Get my gloves off!" Something, possibly liniment from Liston's gloves or his corner's work on the cut, had gotten into Clay's eyes. His vision blurred dangerously. Dundee faced a critical decision: stop the fight and Clay forfeits his title shot, continue and risk permanent damage. Dundee made the call. "This is the big one, Daddy. Stay away from him. Run!" He rinsed Clay's eyes desperately, buying every possible second before the bell. Round 5 began with Clay essentially blind. He couldn't see Liston clearly, just shapes and shadows. Everything Clay had built, the speed, the distance control, the tactical brilliance, was suddenly useless. Liston sensed vulnerability and pressed forward with renewed aggression. What happened next would become boxing legend. Clay, fighting nearly blind, survived. Purely on defensive instinct and muscle memory, he moved, clinched when necessary, and avoided significant damage. His years of training, thousands of hours of footwork drills and defensive movements, allowed his body to function when his eyes couldn't. Liston landed shots, certainly, good shots that would have hurt a fully sighted fighter, but Clay's movement, even compromised, was still superior to most heavyweights at full capacity. He absorbed what he couldn't avoid and created distance when possible. Round 6 approached. In the corner, Dundee continued working on Clay's eyes. The burning was subsiding, vision was returning gradually, and across the ring, something unprecedented was happening. Sonny Liston looked tired. The champion who destroyed everyone was showing signs of fatigue. The cut under his eye was worsening. His punches, while still dangerous, had lost snap. The fight was about to shift dramatically, and this time, Clay could see it coming. Round 6. Clay's vision had cleared enough to see his opponent, and what he saw was revolutionary. Sonny Liston wasn't the invincible destroyer anymore. He was a 32-year-old man who'd never fought past round 1, now exhausted in round 6. His shoulders sagged slightly. His movement had slowed. The intimidating advance had become a tired pursuit. Clay smelled blood. He unleashed combinations with renewed confidence. Jab, jab, right hand. Left hook to the body. Right uppercut. Liston's head snapped back repeatedly. The cut under his eye worsened, blood mixing with sweat. For the first time in his career, Liston appeared beatable. More than beatable. Beaten. The bell ended round 6. Liston trudged to his corner, sitting heavily on his stool. His cornermen worked frantically, applying ice, trying to close the cut, shouting instructions. But Liston wasn't listening. He was staring at his gloves with the expression of a man making a decision. Then, impossibly, Liston said, "That's it." His cornerman didn't understand. "What?" Liston repeated. "I'm done. Cut him off." He claimed his left shoulder was injured, though later medical examinations would find nothing significant. The truth was simpler and more devastating. Sonny Liston had quit. The referee walked to center ring and raised Cassius Clay's arm. The Miami Beach Convention Hall exploded in confusion. Ringside reporters scrambled to file stories about the impossible outcome. Across the ring, Clay leaped onto the ropes, screaming at those same reporters who'd dismissed him. "I'm the king of the world. I'm a bad man. I shook up the world. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived. I don't have a mark on my face, and I'm pretty. I'm a bad man. Sonny Liston is not the greatest. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived." The morning after, everything changed. February 26, 1964. While sports pages tried explaining the inexplicable upset, Cassius Clay held a press conference that would shock America more than his boxing victory. He announced his membership in the Nation of Islam, the black separatist movement led by Elijah Muhammad, considered radical and dangerous by mainstream America. Malcolm X, who'd been in Clay's corner the previous night, stood beside him. The Olympic hero who'd charmed white America had aligned himself with everything white America feared. Then came the name. "Cassius Clay is a slave name," he declared. "I didn't choose it, and I don't want it. I am Muhammad Ali, a free name. It means beloved of God, and I insist people use it when they speak of me." The backlash was immediate and venomous. Sports writers refused to use his chosen name. Former supporters turned hostile. The same boxing establishment that had begrudgingly accepted his victory now wanted to strip him of the title. How dare this young champion challenge America's racial order? How dare he reject the name of a 19th century abolitionist? But Ali, as he now insisted on being called, didn't care about their approval. That was the point. The victory over Liston wasn't just about winning a boxing championship. It was about claiming the right to define himself on his own terms, to choose his own identity regardless of what America wanted him to be. "I don't have to be what you want me to be," he told reporters. "I'm free to be who I want." That freedom was the real victory. The heavyweight championship was just a crown. The transformation from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali was a declaration of independence that would echo far beyond boxing. A champion had been crowned, but more importantly, a new kind of athlete had emerged, one who wouldn't be silent, wouldn't be grateful, wouldn't perform respectability for white approval. The upset victory over Sonny Liston would prove to be just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, Muhammad Ali would defend his title 9 times, perfecting the style he'd debuted in Miami. The combination of unprecedented speed, movement, and psychological warfare that revolutionized heavyweight boxing. He'd predict the round of victory for multiple fights, fulfilling those prophecies with eerie accuracy. He'd engage in verbal warfare that made his pre-Liston antics seem tame. He'd become the most recognized athlete on the planet, his face and voice transcending sports to become symbols of a changing era. But that night in Miami Beach, February 25, 1964, was the genesis. Everything that followed traced back to those 7 rounds against Sonny Liston. The night a 7-1 underdog proved that speed could beat power, that youth could beat experience, that calculated confidence could shatter mystique. Sports analysts would spend decades studying that fight. How did Clay do it? The footwork was revolutionary, moving in patterns heavyweights weren't supposed to master. The psychological warfare was sophisticated, destroying Liston's aura through fearlessness rather than fear. The tactical intelligence was profound, identifying that Liston's conditioning was vulnerable and exploiting it relentlessly. But perhaps most importantly, Clay proved something about belief itself. When 46 out of 46 experts say you can't win, when the betting odds are 7-1 against you, when the opponent across the ring has destroyed everyone who came before, victory requires more than skill. It requires absolute conviction in your own impossible prophecy. "I am the greatest," Clay had shouted for months before the fight. After February 25, 1964, it was no longer boast, it was biography. A legend wasn't born that night in Miami Beach. A legend proclaimed himself into existence, then backed up every word with 7 rounds of boxing genius.